Hi, everyone. To let you know what's going on today, we do actually know from time to time. Barbara Loe, uh, who
I
is
didn't know until I showed up, though.
I know it. Barbara Loe, who is our resident ephemera expert, is going to join us. And what's she going to show us today?
The paper lady, she's always got something made out of paper to show us.
Yes. Do you have any specifics, or are we just going to wing it?
Paper dolls.
No, I don't think so.
No. Die cuts.
She probably has some of those. She's also had the annual Ephemera Society of America convention to tell us about,
Ooh.
where she is on the board of directors and is the convention chairman.
All right, folks, tune back in and see what Barbara Loe has to share with us this week in the world of ephemera. Well, you know where you are because you tuned in and you tuned into the Rare Book Cafe, the book lovers rendezvous. And this week, along with my co-host, Linn, Ridge Books, Calhoun, Georgia. Hello, Lee.
Hello, Ed. I'm glad we know where we are this week.
We know who we are. I'm never sure where I am.
We are. Yeah, we're never sure where you are either.
I'm in a room that barely has a background.
Well,
that's about it. I'm in transition.
Okay, that's all right. That's all right. We
And
can
one of
handle
our
that.
regular, I'm sorry?
We can handle that.
Yeah, I can't. That's why
Yes.
I am. And one of our regular guests, Barbara Loe, back with Ephemera. Hello, Barbara.
Hi, how are you guys? Everybody good?
Everybody's good?
If I was doing any better, I'd be you.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, I just saw Lee in person last month.
That's
Well, I
right.
guess it was earlier this month when we were
Earlier this month, yes.
Florida
Florida.
Antiquarian Book Fair.
Yeah.
And just so that everybody tuning into the show knows, Barbara has some bona fides. She is on the board of the Ephemera Society of America. And I think you're also the conference chair, right?
I am. So
when is the conference?
it was last week.
So, if you've been paying attention, Ed, you would have known this.
I knew that. I think I knew that.
But now it's going to be in a year. So we're planning the next one. So our theme for this year was conflict resolution. And we had a number of presentations that talked about that, ranging from one that fascinated me was on documents that changed hands during wars. So it would be like if people dropped propaganda on the opposition, which has happened in almost every war you can imagine, including what's going on in Gaza right now. And then his other piece of that was when they would capture the enemy, and they would get a treasure trove of documents. So like during the Revolutionary War, they captured generals, and then they got all their strategic information, their maps, things like that. So that was a fascinating presentation. But there were 8 really dynamic presentations, and those are all going to be on YouTube, available on YouTube in, I would say, around May 1st.
Okay.
And
we'll make sure we give our viewers a link to it.
Yeah. So it's terrific that we can record those presentations and then show them. And next year, our theme is going to be the birth of an idea, inventions, and innovation. So
it's going to turn out a lot of material.
Yeah, it should. I mean, My goal is always as conference chair that we cover multiple time periods. You know, a lot of people in the ephemera world get stuck in Victorian times, and but ephemera is the menu that you saw at the restaurant last night, and you know they're going to discard that shortly. Ephemera is any time or place. It's just material that was meant to be used and discarded. So
How about parking tickets? I got a lot of those.
those would be ephemera. But you want to know an example of something that's disappearing, which I
Yeah.
find fascinating, are tickets. Because
Oh,
when
yes.
we were growing up, you went to a concert, you got a ticket, and you saved it because
Right.
it was a big deal. Today, kids, they have them on their cell phones.
That's right.
Or they printed out something. And so the tickets have basically gone away now. And so to me, that's a fascinating thing where moving into the digital world has actually eliminated a certain type of ephemera.
If I
And
start collecting them now, in 100 years, I'll have something
Yeah. But the same
of
is
value.
true. The same is true of programs for that
Yeah.
concert, or
Yeah.
you know, playbills, or anything, and even menus.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
particularly during COVID, menus just disappeared.
all went online. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
everything.
it's a fascinating thing to see how the digital age is affecting it.
Right.
Kind of like newsletters. I had a client one time who collected newsletters that were printed aboard American ships.
Oh, how
Yes.
fascinating. Yeah. Yeah. That, in fact, I have an archive that I have that's interesting. I don't have it today. Maybe I'll bring it out another day, but it was 2 voyages doing the Grand Tour of Europe, one with the mother, and then the other one was 18 years later with her daughter.
Oh, wow.
On
Le
the
Grand
first
Tour.
voyage, she met her husband, and on the second voyage, the daughter went with her father. And so they saved all their material. But things like that are going away, you know? Yeah.
So what did you
yeah.
bring to show us today?
Well, today, on a totally different subject, I brought something called Rewards of Merit. Have either of you heard of those?
Awards or rewards?
Rewards.
Reward. No, I haven't.
So let me explain that a little bit. So most people know that if you're in school and you do something bad, you get demerits. And if you got enough demerits, you'd end up, you know, in the special room after school to, you know, pay your penance, if you will. But most people don't know that the phrase demerits, it came from the rewards of merit that you got. And so in the early 1800s and right through to the early to mid 1900s, kids would get, when they were in school, they would get a reward of merit for good behavior or doing something good.
I would know nothing about that.
Most people don't, and it's a fascinating area. I had a teacher once tell me he saw these after he retired. He said, "Why didn't they ever tell us about this when we were in college?" And I said, "I don't know." But it was an impressive thing if you got a reward of merit. So I'm going to show you a couple different ones. This one is a large one.
Wow.
And it says the American Youth's Diploma, the Hill of Science, and it's awarded to the student, and it's saying for achievement in rewarding, spelling, calligraphy. Boy, that's something you don't see in school anymore. And numbers. But so this was a big thing. And boy, you would take that home and frame it or just put it on your wall because they didn't have a lot of framing back then. But it is, now can you see it?
Special. Oh, yeah, that's
Yeah.
very special.
Yeah, and the coloring and the printing and everything, it's really amazing. So that's an unusual thing to see one that's that big. most of them were more like this. And you would see the reward of merit. They would, the teacher would sign it at the bottom. I don't know if this one is signed, and hopefully date it. And then on the back, there was usually a poem or a verse or something like that. Now this one is
Now that you mentioned these things, I have seen them before, and maybe Lee has as well. You get a house call, you go to somebody's house, and then there's this shoebox. You start going through the shoebox, and you see these little things, and it never occurred to me that they had any
Yeah.
value.
Well, and
Oh, that's a pretty one.
so this is all hand colored, and you'll notice he's carrying a tennis racket. And so, you know, and this one doesn't say what they got it for. Some do, some don't. This is a very early one, and you can see the train.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the back is like a biblical picture and, you know, a verse. So you kind of got a Bible study thing as well as your reward. And this one is probably from the 1830s, 1840s, that period.
I know that my grandchildren, when they were in the really lower grades, there was some system where they would get little slips of paper, like little red slips or green, whatever. But then they would trade those in on something from the reward box.
To get a prize or
to
something.
get a prize, yeah.
Yeah. So that's a little different, and that evolved later. This one I think is fascinating because it shows Native Americans.
Right.
And this one is, to me, it's one of the most interesting ones I've seen. So you have two ships in the harbor, and if you notice, you have Black natives on the shoreline waving at them. I don't know if that was meant to depict Africa, or if that was meant to depict here in the United States after they dropped slaves off. But that was an image that you saw. And I mean,
any indication of from where that state or location where that came from?
No, it was printed. I believe this was printed by Charles Magnus, and it was on a bigger sheet that would have had, I think, 6 of them on there, and then they cut them up. But I mean, to me, that's just a fascinating image. Then sometimes you would get, now these are a little bit later, you would get these, and I'll read it. It says, "Goodness of heart is a sweet virtue." Okay, need the glasses, sorry. "Do not cry, good little sister. I will say that it was me who broke the dish." Okay, and so I have a whole series of these. "Selfishness is a great fault. I have gathered some cherries for my brother. I shall take pleasure in presenting them to him."
Oh.
So, and these you can clearly see that when they got them, they framed them and hung them on the wall. But they're all hand colored. This one says, "Never take the property of others. If you wish people to respect your own property, respect that of others." So
And these few are like from the same publisher, the same series.
Yeah. And this is, "Prizes are the reward of labor. It is not sufficient to carry off the prize, but we should merit it." Good lessons for life.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and then interestingly enough, it's mostly an American phenomenon. This is another early one. It's called "A Winter Scene," and it shows the kids skating on the pond and everything. Very fine paper. I mean, this is so delicate, this paper. So it's amazing that this has survived, 150 years.
Barbara, a quick question: more or less valuable if they've been filled in with a student's name or a teacher's name?
For most people, it doesn't matter. It depends on what your goal is.
Do people research those names? Is that part of
Yes,
some
they
of
do.
the collecting?
So sometimes I had a collection a few years ago that I had, I think I had 14. It was all the same student. And you could see that
Goody
there
two
were,
shoes.
well, but it was across several years. And there were multiple teachers involved. I think there were 4 or 5 different teachers whose names were on the rewards of merit, but clearly that child, I'm going to say he was an achiever, not a goody two shoes, but perspective. But so that had value because it was all the same student.
Sure, sure.
Sometimes you'll see a collection where it all came from like the same school or something like that, but it's more likely that they would stay together because it was the same student. And so for some people, that part is very significant.
Mhm.
For other people, they just like the image and what's represented on it. But I just find them fascinating. Now, what's interesting is mostly when we think about that, we think of it as a strictly American thing. I can tell you right now, in England, they've never heard of them. They don't know what they are. They don't care about them because it was never an English thing. But interestingly, it was a thing in Belgium. So this is the Belgian porcelain reward of merit, and it says it's a ticket of honor. And this is from the Sisters of Notre Dame in Namur, and it was from that boarding school. And then here's another one from Belgium. And so to me, it's fascinating that we have them from Belgium. English people don't have a clue what they are. And in America, it was a very big deal. And it was a big deal for over 100 years. And so, but then I think the thing that you mentioned about getting the tickets and then being able to get a reward from the reward box, my grandkids do that at Culver's today.
Yeah.
They get so many tickets, and
Tickets
then
and they can get
like a basketball or a soccer ball or something like that. So the idea of collecting tickets for good behavior and turning it in for a bigger prize is there. But to me, it's fascinating that what a great way to teach moral lessons, to reward good behavior and everything. And then, of course, we know that there were the children that ended up with the demerits, but that's a different subject.
And they did not get little slips of paper, I don't suppose.
They did. Well, they might have gotten little.
They might have,
but they were different kinds of little slips.
So what about report cards? That just occurred to me. Are those collectible?
Yeah.
I mean, I know that's probably later than your era.
Well, no, one of the things that fascinated me when I was going through my grandmother's papers after she passed away is I found one of her report cards from school with her grades. And it was so interesting to see. Now, she lived in Iowa. And so there were classes on her report card, like agriculture.
Yeah.
You wouldn't see that in most, but you had reading, writing, arithmetic, but you also had deportment, and you had, and it was fascinating to me to see her report card. And I've gotten several report cards that have passed through my hands over the years. Yeah. Generally speaking, with something like that, as well as these rewards, it tends to be when a person has passed away and either they didn't have heirs, and so it just kind of went out in an auction, or the heirs didn't care about them.
Yeah. And I have some from my in-laws, from my mother and father-in-law, and who both went to school here in Gordon County. And deportment, of course, was on there, but also oratory. They had to do weekly speeches. and that was a grade.
That was probably good training for life
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there were books, from like my mother-in-law was born in 1905, and I have some books from that era of little speeches for children, to make.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's fascinating to look at, and there's all kinds of things that have to do with, the whole process of education and schooling.
Yeah.
And a lot of that stuff is very collectible. And it is interesting, as you mentioned, that you can go through and sometimes you can track the individual.
Right.
Yeah. I use Ancestry to trace my family history, but I also use it to try to ID information about people that show up in my ephemera.
Yeah.
And, sometimes you can pinpoint exactly where they lived, where they grew up, and that is.
As a bookseller, it's just another resource that we have to pay an annual subscription for.
There you go.
All right, Barbara, a week after the annual show, I know you picked up some things at the show, so I hope you'll come back and talk to us about what they were.
Okay. Well, we will see you the next time. Thanks.
And Lee, I'll see you every time.
Every time.
With
Bye.
our Rare Book Cafe, the Book Lovers Rendezvous. Bye-bye, everybody.